I did a piece a short while ago about Keir Starmer's apparent U-turn, or not apparent U-turn, clear U-turn over the welfare reforms, and somebody said that I'm criticising his U-turn. I'm not criticising his U-turn. I think the welfare reforms are wrong, and the U-turn doesn't necessarily make them right. The question of political flexibility, so often mistaken for weakness, is something that is worth looking at with respect to Margaret Thatcher, a leader synonymous with the phrase, the lady's not for turning. But she was, in fact, someone who presided over numerous policy U turns. Thatcher's ultimate downfall lay in her refusal to compromise on the poll tax and Section 28, but her broader record demonstrates significant adaptability. By contrast, Keir Starmer's recent welfare reform U-turn, despite being politically necessary, exposes not statesmanlike flexibility, but poor planning and weakness and an inability to listen. Thatcher's most famous declaration came at the 1980 Conservative Party conference, where she failed to see the joke, of course, about Christopher Fry. You turn if you want to. The lady is not for turning. It should have been the lady's not for turning. It was theatre, clever, defiant, memorable, yet the truth is more nuanced. Thatcher did turn, often. In 1981, she reversed plans to abolish mortgage interest rates for couples. In her 1981 budget, harsh at first, was quietly loosened as unemployment and riots spread. The planned abolition of free school milk in secondary schools was scaled back. Her government retreated on the 1986 Education Bill, dropping plans for mandatory testing of all pupils. In industry, she promised no more subsidies, but then approved record aid to British Leyland and Rolls-Royce when collapse threatened jobs. This flexibility, while politically awkward, was arguably wise. She adjusted in response to recession, unrest, and parliamentary rebellion. Yet her downfall stemmed precisely from the inability to adjust on two core issues. Maybe she was tired, maybe she had begun to believe her own myth. The poll tax, marketed as the community charge to sound less punitive, is exactly what we've got now, but fundamentally unchanged, a per capita local tax replacing rates. It met with mass non-payment protests, riots in Trafalgar Square. Thatcher refused compromise, declaring the tax fairer than rates, and her cabinet was aghast. She sacked ministers who questioned it. It became the emblem of her rigid style, and John Major swiftly replaced it with council tax. Section 28, introduced in 1988 to ban the promotion of homosexuality in schools, has been adapted and promoted by Putin and the toad. What's his name? Tolstoy, anyway. Tolstoy's great grandson in the Duma, and despite protest and controversy, Thatcher refused to moderate. And though popular with parts of her base, the thugs, of course, it became a totem of intolerance. Eventually, it was repealed in Scotland in 2000 and in England and Wales in 2003. But the poll tax and Section 28 were cases where branding could not disguise fundamental inflexibility. And Thatcher's wider legislative record demonstrates the difference between campaigning and governing. She promised widespread privatisation but carefully sequenced it to avoid electoral revolt. Industrial policy was ideologically rigid in speeches but pragmatic in deals. Employment law was tough but phased. And this moderation often emerged after serious cabinet debate. Her style was authoritarian, but she listened to allies such as Howe, Lawson and Whitelaw. That's the truth. The iron image concealed hard compromise. Keir Starmer's recent forced retreat over welfare reform is different and worse. He planned major cuts to disability and sickness benefits, targeting 5.5 billion in savings by 2029 to 30. He was already counting the money he was going to get from this bill before the bill had even passed. And facing rebellion from his own MPs, he hastily watered down the welfare reform, shaving off only ending up with a possibility of saving only £3 billion. There's no plan for a phased approach or consultation, and the result is a humiliating scramble. Where Thatcher's U-turns were tactical concessions to maintain control, Starmer shows that he lacks control in the first place. Starmer's challenge is not that he is too flexible, it's that his inflexibility is not based on conviction but on poor preparation and on a failure to listen. In fact, in Starmer, what one sees is not so much a reduplication of Thatcher as a reduplication of Theresa May. Thatcher was a complex leader. Despite her iconic words, she presided over multiple U-turns, adapting to economic and political pressure, but her ruin came from refusing to compromise on deeply unpopular measures like the poll tax and Section 28. Starmer's situation exposes a fundamental difference. He's been forced to U-turn not because he is deft, but because he was unprepared and brittle in the face of internal opposition. And anyone looking at this would be able to see that internal opposition in the first place. It's as if he has been, he just doesn't want to listen to dissent. Listening to dissent is about being a prime minister. And if that dissent is not coming from the opposition, it will come from his own party. And that's proven to be the case, and very fast. Political leadership is the art of knowing when to stand firm and when to bend. Thatcher's legend rests on that balancing act, even as her downfall reminds us of just such limits.